Brandon Drake, functional nutrition coach and therapeutic chef at heartfulfoods.com. So, in my last two presentations, I actually talked about bread, certain types of bread. I talked about sourdough bread, then I talked about sprouted bread or Ezekiel bread, which is a type of sprouted bread. And then a lot of people ask me questions are, well, what are some gluten-free breads that I could eat? And here's the thing, for a lot of people it's really hard to give up bread because it's a staple in our lives. We eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and we end up being so used to it and so addicted to it without us even being aware of it. And the reason why we're so addicted to it is because what happens is when you're consuming gluten, you are actually feeding your gut microbiome. Basically, the foods that you're eating are determining the makeup of your microbiome. Your microbiome is your community of microorganisms that are living in your gut. So essentially, when you consume gluten, you're feeding the bacteria and the microbes that crave gluten, and they use it as food, and they're able to thrive and to grow and to multiply. So essentially, it gets to the point where they're so healthy and they're so well fed that they're always going to send you messages telling you that you want gluten. So you're always going to have gluten, and you're always going to have the idea that I can't live without gluten. I need gluten. I want gluten. And the thing is, your gut microbiome has so much control over how you're feeling because for every one message that's sent from your brain to your gut sends 9 messages back. So your gut microbiome really plays a big role in determining how you feel, what your needs are, what you're craving. So that's why it's so hard to give up gluten, because when you actually start giving it up, what happens is your bacteria or your microbes that are dependent on making sure they're fed that gluten, what happens to them is they start dying off. And when they die off, they'll send even more messages telling you that you want gluten. Therefore, you start craving it and you start asking yourself and you questioning your life of yourself of saying, well, should I be giving up gluten? I need gluten. I just really need it. And that's not you that has a lack of discipline. It's basically your gut microbiome and your microbes sending you these messages to make you succumb to consuming the gluten. So that's just what's happening inwards or within you that makes you crave gluten so much. And that's why there are a lot of people uh, that are still asking me, well, what brand of gluten can I consume? Now, I'm not going to give you brands because I've given up gluten. I've been off gluten since 2018 or so. And I gave it up because I've learned so much about it, and I learned all the negatives with gluten of how when you consume it, it tears up the intestines, creating leaky gut, which leads to inflammation. And then when there's inflammation, it'll manifest itself into different unwanted chronic symptoms depending on what your genetic predisposition is. And because I want to take a proactive approach when it comes to my health, I don't even want to deal with those unwanted chronic symptoms in the future. And I also treat that I have that same mentality, and I implement that to my clients. But my clients already have compromised health, so I make sure to tell them all the disadvantages of consuming gluten and why they're experiencing some of these symptoms that they can't figure out why they're experiencing. It's because of gluten and amongst the many other inflammatory foods that they're eating. But back to the brand of gluten-free breads that I recommend. I don't recommend a certain brand as because I gave up gluten and because I felt so much better in terms of being sharper in mind and having so much energy. I basically felt so good that I didn't even want to go back to consuming gluten. Basically, unhealthy foods don't taste as good as healthy feels, and I felt so good because I'm a coach and I talk to a lot of people, and also too I'm a therapeutic chef and I'm standing up a lot. Having that extra energy and having the mind sharpness just made me addicted to really liking that optimum level of performance that I didn't want to consume gluten anymore. So, like, I went back again to what is the good brands to consume, and there is no really good brands. You basically, not that I'm going to say there's no good brands, I'm not familiar with the brands. You basically have to look at the ingredients. And the gluten free flours that you should avoid. Uh, are the following ones. It is buckwheat flour, whole wheat flour, white rice flour, brown rice flour, tapioca flour, potato and corn flour, and arrowroot flour. Those are ones to avoid because they are high on the glycemic index. And the glycemic index is basically a value assigned to the foods based on how quickly or how slowly these foods increase your blood sugar. And the ones that are high are like I said previously, the buckwheat and the arrowroot. They have a high glycemic index. Basically means that your blood sugar rises really quickly and then falls really quickly. And when it rises and then it falls really quickly, you end up being hungrier a lot faster. So therefore, you'll continue to eat. And if you continue to eat high glycemic foods, you'll always be hungrier faster, never satisfied or satiated. So therefore, over time, you gain weight. And that's also obviously a bad thing. And also, too, when you have constantly elevated blood sugar, it actually leads to the hardening of the blood vessels, otherwise known as atherosclerosis, and atherosclerosis increases your risk of having heart attack or stroke. So basically, you're exchanging one negative for another negative. You're like, oh, well, I know gluten is bad, so I'm going to go gluten free. And then with gluten free, there's a lot of bad things happening to you. So you're exchanging one negative, many negative symptoms for even more negative symptoms for supposedly going to gluten free. And a lot of manufacturers make you think that gluten free is the healthier version when in fact it's really not. There's actually specific flours that you can consume that are high in the glycemic index that cause many unwanted symptoms to occur. Now, if you really still really want gluten-free bread, the breads that are low on the glycemic index, which means they're healthier, these ones that are low in glycemic index, actually a zero glycemic index, is walnut flour, almond flour, flaxseed, and ones that are low on the glycemic index, they don't have a zero in terms of glycemic index, but they're low and they're still approved. It's soy flour, oat flour, and coconut flour. So to run it by you again, the good ones are walnut, almond, and flaxseed flour, and also soy, oat, and coconut flour. So if you really crave these a bread consistency, then those are the flours to actually look at when you are determining the ingredients that are listed in the back of the nutritional facts of the gluten-free bread that you're going to eat. So I hope this has been helpful. If you have questions, please contact me. Go to heartfulfoods.com, go to my contact form, ask me whatever questions you want, because the more questions you ask me, the more content that I'll be able to put out in terms of video and or blog articles. And I'm constantly always thinking about what people want, and I obviously make those videos and write up those blog articles, but it's always best to hear from you and ask your questions so that I could actually answer your questions via a video or a blog article. Again, my name is Brandon Drake, functional nutrition coach and therapeutic chef at heartfulfoods.com. Peace.